We got a scientist who's willing to drink cholera to prove a point, a scientist who had bedbugs crawl all over themselves, and a scientist who did surgery on themselves. All of this on today's most amazing top 10 list. And right before we get into that, guys, I want to give a huge shout out to our new channel, Viper Girl. This is premiering on January 22nd. It's going to have games like Minecraft, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Cyberpunk, all live streamed. Make sure you guys go check it out.
Oh my gosh, I almost died. I thought you were a cactus, my friend. I thought you were a cactus. We've got iron, baby. Yes. Okay, my main goal is to blow up and then act like I don't know nobody. Bro, no, I'm gonna fight you with a pork chop. No, come here. This is awesome.
Coming in number 10, we have It's All in the Farts. When I tell you this point, you are going to realize that people not wanting to accept the truths of sickness have been around for hundreds of years, maybe even since humans were able to discover where disease came from. So walking around today not wanting to wear a mask is nothing new. In fact, when people first discovered that bacteria was making people sick, many scientists refuted that evidence because they all thought it was bad air that made you sick. Yeah, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Imagine living in a time when people thought you could get killed by a fart. Well, one of the biggest proponents of this was Max von Pennenkofer. This guy hated the idea that people weren't going to be afraid of farts anymore. He loved his fart theory, and to prove that he was right, he took some cholera and put it in some broth, and then he drank it. To further prove his point, he drank bicarbonate soda to break down his stomach acid, because there was a theory that stomach acid could kill bacteria ingested orally. Well, here's the thing, the dude didn't get sick, or did he? Reports say that he had mild symptoms, but he never got so sick that it became a problem. Therefore, he was right in his mind. The reason that he didn't get sick was probably because he had been exposed to cholera before and built up a resistance, because we all know that cholera will make you very sick. It was probably a combination of that and him hiding how sick he really was. Because if you're trying to prove someone wrong and then you realize that you're actually wrong, you have two options. You can admit defeat, or you can dig in your heels. And with a guy who was willing to drink a deadly bacteria to prove a point, I think we all know what direction he would go in. Coming in at number 9, we have Eat Your Scabs. Rolling right into our next point, we know that scientists are willing to put weird things in their mouth to prove a point, no matter how disgusting or dangerous it might seem. For this, we have to head back to the 1930s and to the southern United States. During this time, there was a pandemic that was killing thousands of people every year, and this was pellagra. This was a disease that's similar to scurvy. It starts when you're lacking in nutrients, and that nutrient being vitamin B. But at this time, no one knew this. People thought that the sickness could have been caused by some sort of bacteria or germ. So if you caught it, you would be quarantined and slowly die, even though no one around you could catch it. But how could they know? It looks like you can catch it because it's a horrible skin disease. But then comes along Joseph Goldberger. This dude was smart as hell and sussed out that this wasn't caused by a germ. And to prove his point, he got himself, his wife, and his friends to munch down on scabs and other excrement from pellagra patients. And guess what? No one caught it. He died before he could prove his theory, but thanks to his research, years later, people were able to prove him right. Coming in at number 8, we have too much acid. No, we're not talking about LSD. In fact, we're actually talking about hydrochloric acid. If someone walked up to you right now and said, drink this hydrochloric acid for $20, you would probably say no. Well, John Haldane was a little more outgoing than you. This dude drank hydrochloric acid to find out what the effects would be on the body. He had theories that it would impact the muscles while working out. This dude really wanted to get to the bottom of this. Coming in at number 7, we have I wonder what this one does. It would be wild to be a scientist back in the 1700s. You had access to a bunch of volatile things and you had no idea what any of them did, and the best way to find out what they did was just to mess around with them. And that's what scientist Sir Humphrey Davy was famous for. This dude was experimenting in gases. See, back in the day, people had no idea what the effect of these mysterious substances would be on the body. So Humphrey was like, screw it, I'll just start inhaling the stuff and see what happens. This guy would suck back random gases, and eventually he came across nitrous oxide. And if you know anything about this, it gets you high. Dentists use this and they sometimes call it laughing gas. Well, this dude loved it and he started to get his pals to huff this stuff. Eventually, this became the coolest thing to do, and people were huffing nitrous out of silk bags, which sounds like the fanciest way to do drugs. Coming in at number 6, we have chasing the cure. Trying to find a cure for cancer is nothing new. People have been trying to crack down on this horrible disease for decades, and in the early 20th century, there was a breakthrough in cancer treatment. A new element was on the scene, and it was known as radium. It would have tons of use in the field of weaponry, but there were other minds who wanted to see how it could be used for good. A French scientist named Pierre Curie wanted to see what prolonged exposure to radium would do to the body, so he set up his arm to be in nearly direct contact with a small amount of radium for 10 hours. He had a theory that exposure to radium would cause some sort of cells on the arm to die, and he was right. He got a small burn, and he was quick to turn this into a formula that people could use to treat some skin diseases like lupus. Coming in at number 5, we have creepy crawlies. How far are you willing to go for your work? Well, what about letting bed bugs crawl all over your arm for 10 years? Yeah, this is what we got going on here. Regine Grez was hard at work trying to find a way to lure out bed bugs. She was doing this through isolating the chemicals that they produce through their pheromones, so she could use those chemicals to mimic their pheromones and lure them into a trap. To experiment this, she put those chemicals onto her arm and then placed it into an isolated area and introduced the bed bugs. Through her experiments, it's estimated that she was bit 180,000 times. Coming in at number 4, we have This Will Make You Puke. Okay, this is probably the grossest one on the list so far. Yellow fever used to be a terrible thing that was killing thousands of people. A man by the name of Stubbins Firth was going to get to the bottom of it. He saw that people who were sick with yellow fever would have black vomit, and he thought that the infectious disease must be present in their vomit, so he drank their vomit. Yeah, he didn't get sick because that's not how yellow fever is passed, and then he was wrong because he thought yellow fever wasn't an infectious disease because he didn't get it from drinking their vomit. If anyone doesn't know, yellow fever is infectious and it comes from mosquitoes. Coming in at number 3, we have Beat Up Like Rocky. The human body can withstand a lot. Pushing yourself to your limit is a great way to find out what you're capable of. And for John Paul Stapp, he wanted to prove to the world that the human body could take an insane amount of punishment. Before Stapp, the common consensus was that the body could handle about 18 times the Earth's gravitational force before a person would die. Well, Stapp was like, there's no way that could be true, and he decided to test this theory. He built the fastest sled of all time to prove his point. This was basically a rocket on a track, and I'm sure you have seen some footage from it somewhere because the testing is actually quite famous. This thing would fire Stapp at speeds that no one had ever traveled at before because people thought you would actually die if you went that fast. Also, Stapp wasn't just some random dude who wanted to go fast. He was a fighter pilot who had been testing his body against G-forces for years. Through a series of tests, he was able to prove that the body wouldn't die after 18 Gs of force, but that it could handle up to 46 Gs of force. Now, when I say handle, I don't mean that he got out of his little rocket and walked off to Sunday church. No way, dude. Stapp had broken bones, a detached retina, and his internal organs were compressed, but the dude survived, and he continued to use himself as a test dummy in future experiments. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have seatbelts in cars. Coming in at number 2, we have Stick a Needle in Your Eye. We all know Isaac Newton is the dude who invented gravity and got us all stuck on Earth. I learn all my science from memes. Well, this dude wasn't only into apples and why they would fall from trees. He had a few other passions that were also strange. Newton wanted to know why we see what we see. To be more specific, he thought it was very interesting that we see color and how the body was able to process something like that. Now, most people would have cut into a cadaver to see what was going on with their juicy eye holes, but Newton didn't have any time for that. He was a man of action, so he decided that he would take a needle and slide it right next to the bone around his eye and into the back of his eye socket. Yeah, if you're smart enough to invent calculus, you're probably crazy enough to do something like this. But Isaac Newton did see some colors start to pop up because he was poking the cones in the back of his eyes, which helped people process color. Also, you can do the same thing if you just rub your eyes a little bit. And coming at the number 1 spot, we have I'll Take It From Here. Sometimes you don't trust anyone to do anything but yourself. A lot of people are like this with driving. They hate sitting in the passenger seat because they don't feel safe unless they're behind the wheel. Well, imagine being this way with surgery. This is probably the most famous self-experiment of all time. This is when Evan Kane wanted to find out if Novocaine could be used as a better anesthetic than ether. To do this, he needed to get the patient's perspective, and he wasn't going to do a small, simple procedure. No, he was going in deep. This guy was going to juice up his belly with Novocaine and then pull out his own appendix. Now, I have to say, I don't know if there was a better way to do this. I mean, I think he could have gotten one of his colleagues to do the surgery, and he would have had a similar but much safer experience, but this dude was so much of a badass that he wanted to not only prove his point, but he wanted to be the only dude to take out his own appendix. That's something that will get you in the history books for sure. And the surgery went off without a hitch, and before you know it, this dude was up and walking again, which is a pretty boss move. Alright guys, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I have been your host, Jay Durana, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye. Many scientists refuted that evidence. To further prove his point, he drank to further prove. For this we have to head back to the year 1930, and for this we have to before Stab, the common consensus was that the body could only handle about 18 times the